right. So getting this thing started, I think it'll be useful for not only me, but anybody listening in the future, for you to give us a little bit of your background, where you came from, how you went from physics and got into more so metaphysics, and then really anything else you want to give us about the journey, and we can get the ball rolling.
Yeah. As so many who are looking for answers and ask very fundamental questions, at the beginning of my life, I thought that I would find these questions in physics, because physics is considered the most fundamental science that tells you what the universe is made of and goes down to the most tiny particles and to the most basic principles. And therefore, as so many, you tend to believe that, well, every answer must be found inside this view of the world. The purely physicalist and reductionist point of view. So a very materialistic thinking. Then I embarked in this study. I made my study, I made my master's degree, my Ph.D., and so on, so on. But already during this journey, I already found out that, you can have very interesting insights, but the answers to the fundamental questions, you cannot find them there. And why? Because physics, as so many sciences which are based on the hard stuff, on matter only, is a way of looking at the world. What I realized, it is not wrong or right. It is one way with which you look onto the world. But it is not the whole thing. You must integrate this way of seeing the world also from other perspectives. And there, of course, then almost naturally, the more philosophical questions came up. And I realized that you cannot find all the answers in that paradigm, even if that paradigm, the materialistic paradigm, not only I would say it is necessary to have also that point of view, but you must go also beyond. And then, I was more interested then for a long time in philosophical questions. And finally, I also was very interested in the approach of the Eastern, so-called Eastern philosophies, which for me are not philosophies. They are a more experiential approach. Because as in the West, we have this, it's also an experiential approach made from the third person perspective, where you look at the world, at the material world, and make your experiments, observations, etc., etc. At a certain point in my life, I found that you can apply the same method with a first-person approach, where you make certain experiences which tell you something also about the outer world, not only the inner world. Mm. And there, the pieces of the puzzles began to come together. This scientific point of view, philosophical point of view, which is still a mental point of view, and the experiential point of view, essentially based on mystic experiences. And then I began to study also the writings of the mystics, especially of the Eastern philosophies, but not excluding also other traditions. And from there grew a sort of integral vision of things that I didn't find expressed elsewhere. And therefore I worked on that. And then I wrote my book and so on. Okay, this is now my psychological life. I could also give you some external facts that I born in Italy, and then now I'm living in Germany, and then I worked as a Ph.D. postdoc in some universities and so on. But these are again the exterior, superficial details that would not tell you much about my personality.
Yeah, no, I think that was great. So, where does science, or maybe the dogma of science, fall short, would you say? What fundamental questions can it not answer? Does it try to answer but fall short with?
Yeah, I think the most paradigmatic field is that of consciousness studies.
Mm-hmm.
From a purely scientific perspective, we should be all unconscious. From a scientific perspective, consciousness is woohoo. It's a sort of pseudoscience.
Magic.
Yeah, magic. but no, but not even that. Because from a purely scientific perspective, you should deny that anything like consciousness exists.
Mm.
Show me that you are conscious.
Oh, I see. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Can you prove? No, you can't. Why do we accept, nevertheless, that we may not be able to define it. We may not be able to rationalize it in a formal mathematical system. But every one of us would say, yeah, I am conscious. And why? Because of a first-person experience, not because you have discovered something out there. And that's, I think, the big problem that nowadays science is beginning, it's only in the beginning, to realize that there's something wrong, that we are missing something. I remember in the 1990s, there was a great revival because all these neuroscientific devices, brain scans, EEG, fMRI, and so on, these brain scan technologies began really to allow us to investigate in real time the functioning of our brain. And there was then this belief that, okay, now we are at that point that we will be able to understand and explain what consciousness is, where it comes from, and so on. I would say there 2 decades have passed and zero progress. And I would even contend that when it comes to the so-called hard problem of consciousness, I don't know if you are acquainted with it, the hard problem of consciousness here is, to put it bluntly, is the question, the problem, how can a bunch of neurons, which is just biochemical reaction, give rise to this subjective experience to sentience, to an individual that has feelings, emotions, and sees qualities, so-called qualias. This is a big part of science, that we had this illusion that this could be explained away soon, but it's not. And I would even contend that from this point of view, we have made zero progress since the times of Descartes, who first began to think about these things. So for centuries, we have made zero progress when it comes to these philosophical, more fundamental questions. And this is a sign. It is something that should tell us something, that perhaps we are seeing the world from a wrong paradigm. Or at least we should not exclude this paradigm, but we should enlarge it, extend it to another way of seeing, and begin to accept also the first-person approach in science. This is one of the main. I predict that the next big problem will be that of life. What is life? So this is also a big question. Huh? And so I think we are going towards very interesting times. They are already very interesting, I would say. and where these questions will lead us, I think, to a very different way of seeing the world and ourselves, first and foremost.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well said. I'll have to say that, correct me if I'm wrong, science seems like a great map of the territory.
Yeah.
But it's like, it's not the whole territory. It's just the model. It provides a great model. If one can balance the subjective and the objective, it can be very useful for figuring out what is life. But if you just stay on one pole, I guess, then yeah, you can get stuck in either the woo-woo, because there is a lot of woo-woo, or you can get stuck into the materialism. So I think there is some kind of coalescence between those two worlds for sure. But I guess that's up to the individual. Like, it's really up to us to be able to navigate the territory, to use the map, and then also go on the journey of the map, at the same time. So yeah, what does this subjective experience come down to the individual? Is it just like simple meditation, like a simple self-inquiry practice? What do you do?
Well, yes, I practice meditation. I follow my spiritual path, but I don't think that I don't never give any advice or in this sense, because I believe that everyone has one's own path, and also the very materialistic way of seeing the world is part also of an experience that maybe one needs to do to grow in consciousness. In a certain sense, I'm even grateful to people like Richard Dawkins, who are the ultra-materialists, because they allow us to exercise also a different aspect of our being, that is a purely rationalistic way of looking at the world. And they are, in a certain sense, these people helping us to cleanse our way of thinking in pseudoscientific terms. However, having said that, that's obviously not the direction. I think that so to come to your question, how do we? I think there's a path for everyone. My path is that of Aurobindo, Sri Aurobindo, the integral yoga, and because there, in reality, I feel that there I have found that integral paradigm that I was looking for. But that's not for everyone. It's not necessary to have a particular path. The most important thing is that every one of us finds one's own inner subjective experience, and that grows us in consciousness. What however, perhaps I might say, it's also important, not only when we speak of spiritual, we think of something emotional, something like that, which is also true. There is also this emotional aspect, especially who follows the path of devotion or something like that. But there is also what we truly need now is to develop the intuitive way of thinking that goes beyond the mind, beyond the pure reason, beyond rationality, beyond people would call it something transrational. It is, but it is not the so-called emotional mind. It is, I would call it more intuitive mind, spiritual mind, because the emotional mind, when we speak of emotions, we speak also of something that can be also have a quite negative connotation. Emotions are of anger, of wrath, of sadness, of
envy,
frustration.
jealousy.
Yeah. That's not the kind of mentality, of course, that I would like. So I prefer not to use this term, but I hope that people understand what I mean. It's try also in the scientific world, when we look at very material things, to go behind the purely material appearances and see intuitively the whole. Yeah.
Yeah.
What you see, then it's up to everyone. But what I see is a sort of what words are never satisfying, but it is sort of a spirit behind all things. Call it cosmic consciousness, if you wish. The divine, God, whatever you want. These are words, but behind the workings of nature, there is a spirit in action that works behind the veil.
Mm-hmm.
This intuitive way of seeing is necessary also now in our very scientific thinking. And if this will not come, then I think we will go towards lots of difficulties. Also.
Yeah. Quite possibly self-destruction.
Yeah.
At an extreme.
Also, maybe.
Yeah. I know what you mean. And I would say once one develops that intuitive sense, it's like easier to see the bigger picture behind all things. It's like the inner working. You get to see like, yeah, the mind of God, the inner working of God. And I feel like you can see the order in things, right? Because I feel like science, in a way, tries to explain and bring things down to an orderly explanation through models and through proofs and through mathematics. And that's useful, but it's only like one layer. I feel like with the intuitive sense, you can see the model of science working out, but also at a greater extent, right? You could see like how nature is its own organism, or you can see how you're just like this giant organism and have billions of microorganisms within you, and just the list goes on. But you can see how it all works out in this mechanistic way. And my intuitive sense says that it's growing towards something, like it's growing toward a sense of novelty. Like we're still evolving. And I think Aurobindo says this, I actually read this last night, that the human being is a transitional being. Like we're a transitional organism. Like we're not yet finished. Like we think we got it, we're done, this is it. No, we're still building towards something, right? You know, we have a working mind, we have hands with opposable thumbs for a reason. We're supposed to like build the kingdom, one could say. We're supposed to like be the paintbrush and the workers of God, one could say. There's a lot of different metaphors, but I think if you know, you know. And once you go that within yourself, you find out how one can become useful to the inner workings of this source energy, the force, the Tao, the way, whatever it is. But it's like, I think it's all in our own accord to be able to do that, right? Do you feel that?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. What you said is also, I would say, you perceive that there is a reason, there is a purpose, there is an aim in this evolution. We may not be able to capture it, to rationalize it, and perhaps it's fortunately, because whenever we try to bring things down and rationalize everything, we suck out its life from its true meaning. But that's also something that we have to transcend with modern science. This idea of a meaningless, aimless, purposeless universe.
Yeah.
But if this is true, so let's make a bit this exercise of seeing things from the different points of view. How is it that then this universe built up these beings who have purpose, who have sentience, who are not unconscious like dead matter, who have an aim, who have feelings, and so on? Where does this dichotomy come from? How can this be? And what is really, and there are also some research that show that people, that there is the suicide rate among people. One of the main reasons is because they don't find any purpose in their life. They feel that we are told from science that essentially there is no purpose, no reason. when we speak about evolution, how many times do we hear also evolutionary biologists saying, for example, evolution is unguided.
Yep, random
Okay,
mutations by accident.
random mutation.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's just by accident. What is this accidents? They unconsciously, yeah, this transmits a worldview, which, okay, you are entitled, you have your opinion. If you wish, you are allowed to entertain this opinion, but don't sell it as science. That's a metaphysical claim that evolution is unguided. You may also tell that as a biologist, as a scientist, I cannot put into divine intervention in my, when I have to publish a paper in a biology journal, I cannot speak of divine intervention. Of course not. But don't make this because this is a metaphysical claim, no more, no less than saying that there is divine intervention. The fact that evolution is unguided. And let me make another example. As I asked previously, what is life? When we speak about life, we ask a biologist. Biology is the science of life, that studies life, and there is these ideas of vitalism, for example, of vital forces, is completely wrong, has been eliminated, doesn't exist, and so on. Okay, so let's take the first person perspective. What is life? The first person perspective tells us, well, life is, as we said, about random mutations, about natural selection. An organism is a system, a self-organizing complex system, non-linear complex system, and that metabolizes and that undergoes a Darwinian evolution. Okay, that's right. And there's no precise definition of what life is. It is, nowadays we don't have this, but more or less most biologists would tell you this, or something like that. Okay, now let me ask you, what is your life? How is your life going, and how do you feel to be a living organism? I don't think nobody would say, oh, I am a nonlinear complex system who is trying to self-reproduce itself and is metabolizing. Nobody would speak taking this first-person perspective in such a way when we talk about what life is. So where do all these things come from? I mean, when we speak from this perspective, we are speaking about feelings, emotions, desires, passions, pain and pleasure, love and hate also, why not? There is a consciousness, there is a volition, there is a will. Does biology explain us this kind of things about life? Zero. Zilch. Nada. Nix. So there is something our way of thinking about these things is a bit schizophrenic, and we need to bring these things together. And maybe, also this idea of that there might be vital forces might turn back. I'm very in favor of this idea, because when we speak about desires, will, passions, and these things, what are these things? Instincts. We have no idea what this is. So let us begin to exercise our mind and our intuition, perhaps, our way of seeing life from this multi-perspectival point of view, standpoint. And let us see where this leads us. That's the way of that I'm trying to introduce.
Yeah, that's awesome. It's like our being is multi-layered, you know? I mean, there's some say, the non-dualists would say, no, it's all one. And I understand that point of view. But there's layers within the one, you know? There's waves in the ocean. Everyone knows that metaphor.
Yeah.
So in that, yeah, there's different layers to what it means to be a human being. And I think, yeah, the best point of view, the most helpful and useful point of view for us is to be able to examine all of the layers all at the same time.
Exactly.
But you know what's funny, right? Is it almost seems like it works one way. So it's like, how do I put this? It's like the higher you go, you can look down on the layers. It's almost like a hierarchy rather than equal layers. It's almost like seems like a hierarchy where if you just stay at a materialistic point of view and that's your dogma, it's hard to see the other side. Like if you're just looking at the mechanism, it's hard to see what the mechanism is creating. It's hard to see like the entire mechanism. If you just, sorry, let me rephrase that. If you're just looking at the mechanics, it's hard to see the mechanism, the entire mechanism. You know what I mean? But if you can see the entire mechanism, it's easier to see the mechanics, the workings of it. You follow me? So it's almost like, how do I put this? Science is great. I love science. But you can get easily trapped into that because like I said, it only seems to work one way. It's very hard for somebody that is materially minded. And I know I'm speaking from personal experience. I used to be a rational, pragmatic atheist. There's no magic. There's no spirit. Get all of that out of my face, right? I was just all about if you can't show me, it doesn't exist. I had a problem like seeing the point of view like upper, higher, right? Even though it's not a hierarchy, it does seem like it in how I'm thinking of it right now. But now that I can see it from this, like, you know, what is life? What is consciousness? Where do my passions come from? The magic of life. It's a lot easier to see, not shoo away the mechanics. It's a lot easier to see how the mechanics all interrelate within the mechanism. You know what I mean? It's just like, it makes it easier. I almost feel like a true grounded spirituality almost furthers science. It almost makes it come together even better, right? It doesn't, they're not like, for some reason we have like they're opposing poles. That's only if you're not a really integrated being. If you're truly integrated, I feel as though they work. It's like peanut butter and jelly. Yeah, you just have to be able to, I think, be able to stay wondrous. I think that's really what's important. Stay wondrous, no matter what your dogma is. Stay wondrous, and I don't know. Yeah, keep asking questions. Always keep asking questions about what all of this is, because we really don't have it figured out. Even though we have very exquisite models of physics that you probably know way more than I know about, it's like we know. I feel like once you do go within yourself, we know a minuscule amount of really what life is. Like, just even though we do know some of the mechanics of the mechanism, it's just a modicum of what we truly know, right? So I don't know. I'm just trying to say, stay curious, right? Stay curious and wondrous to the grand mechanism that we find ourselves in. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. I completely agree with you. And I'm not sure that this is what you meant, but for me, seeing things also from this upper hierarchy means to see the same effects, but realizing different causes. The causes are not just mechanistic, but can be can come from something else. This perception, this inner perception that the principles of cause and effect must be extended. The problem that I had when I speak about hierarchies, and that's also something that we have perhaps to tackle with in our modern society, that people don't like this idea of higher and lower. Because the material world is lower, and then there's a spirit that is higher. People prefer to have it horizontal. I also prefer this idea of, for me, there are higher states of consciousness and lower states of consciousness, for example.
Yeah, but you could say there's just higher causes, right? Or there's
higher causes.
Yeah.
But, you know, it's difficult to agree on these things. I don't think it's necessary to agree, but there are differences between love and hate, for example. I like to put hate down and love above. The question, of course, is of what kind of love are we talking about? Because love can be also very egoistic, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
But okay, then I say, then there is a human egoistic love, but above even there's a divine love, which is has no selfishness. Okay, you must have some glimpse of experience of this, but I like to say that this is higher, and the hate somehow stands at a lower level. But it's not necessary to agree about these things. As you said, it's more important to become aware that there are different layers. We are made of different layers. And then if you want to put it on a horizontal line or a vertical line, this is semantics. It's or conceptual organization that is perhaps not so relevant. But the idea to become aware of these layers is extremely important also in science. Or in philosophy. Let's make a philosophical example, because when you were talking, it came to my mind the typical problem that has acquired a new energy in the last, new vital force in the last decade, I would say, about free will, which is an old problem. I think it dates back to the ancient Greece. But the question whether we have free will or not. I don't want to give you a final answer about this. It's not necessary. And just want to show you how we can take different perspectives on this. So the typical, also, I would say also by professional philosophers, by very, very smart people, and professors in universities who write also papers in journals and so on, they will try to answer this question with yes and no, and will argue. So if you realize that we are being with very different levels, the first question that arises is not if we have free will or not, but who is supposed to be free from what?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly.
Because, and that's almost immediate. If you had this vision from above and see the whole. If you are instead entrenched in this physicalist perspective where you see only a body and a brain biochemistry in your skull, this does not come up easily as a question. And by the way, what is will? Where does this will come from? Here again, we are a bit on the question of life. Because I'm certainly not free to my body. I cannot flap my hands and fly. Yeah. So I can take an airplane, but not by flapping my hands. No? Mm-hmm. So in this sense, I certainly don't have free will because I'm limited by the physical laws. But of course, this is a bit shallow point of view. Let's go a bit deeper in the thing. Is my mind free to think what it wants? Everyone who has practiced meditation knows all too well how it is difficult to silence the mind, and it's lots of ideas that come. Okay, but are these ideas free or not? But, well, okay, wait a moment. But beside my body, beside my mind, there's another layer, the emotions. my emotions, are my thoughts independent from my emotions? I could hardly say that. Almost nobody would say that my mind is perfectly free from any influence of emotional. So this mind is influenced by these emotions. And probably, and we are already, we also modern psychology, also modern Western psychology knows all too well that there is all a layer of the subconscious, unconscious, and there are a lot of layers of the human being, of life, and probably also in animals. And so, again, the question, who is supposed to be free from what? We are certainly not free completely, but the answer cannot be binary.
Yeah.
There can be not a binary yes or no answer. We must begin to think also in different layers of possible answers that go beyond this binary way of thinking. Mm-hmm. So this is another example of how we need to go beyond this certain paradigm to think also in a multi-perspectival way.
Yeah. I would throw out there, I believe what's happening is we're going from the lack of free will, which maybe one can call that predeterminism, or maybe just being at the whim of our environment, into becoming more free as time goes on. Yeah. As I said, or as Aurobindo said, that we're in transition. Well, I believe we're transitioning into becoming more free as time goes on. Ideally, I think we're freeing ourselves from the shackles of the material world, it seems. Slowly and slowly, I believe that's how we're evolving. And the thing is, we do it consciously. It's a conscious evolution. It's like it's this weird, it's this weird paradox. It's like we make the decision to become more conscious, and then thus from that we become more conscious to make the decision. You know what I mean? So I feel like that's what's happening, is like we're slowly and slowly growing into more free will. Yes, we're not completely free. We're not 100% gods, but we're becoming more godlike, it seems, as time goes on. We're getting that inner discernment, there's something, that inner, we can all feel it, that inner decision maker, that inner discriminator that says yes or no, the one that makes the decisions in a way. It seems like if you can dial down free will to an essence in our brain, it's the one that has, say, a dilemma in front of us, and it either says yes or no to the dilemma, either 0 or 1, on or off. It's the one that says left or right. I believe we're becoming more in tune with whatever that is. That intuitive guidance that we spoke of in the beginning, I think that's what's happening in this human evolution, is we're just becoming, as time goes on, more and more aligned with that. And we do it all on our own accord, but I also think it's happening collectively. Just at this time, we're becoming synced up to some kind of essence. And if we want to talk about what the mechanism is for, it's that. It's like this, it's this self-fulfilling building mechanism of free will, if that even makes sense. It's like we're God building itself into a God. That's a classic story. It's like, I think to paraphrase the Bible, it's like God became man so that he can become God again. It seems like that's the cycle of what's happening. It's like the essence, the one essence, the spirit, Brahman, some may say, came from the void or wherever, came into the material world. And now the material world seems to be evolving, maybe not back into the void, but it's like taking that Brahman aspect and building it here in the material world, which is like evolving into a state that is quite literally unfathomable, but I can feel it. Like there's something in me that feels like that's what's happening. I believe that's what's happening, man. It's like we're gaining as time goes on. If you want, willfully, if you want, that's the thing. If you want to become more free, you will become more free. And I think that's what's happening. It's like we're consciously evolving ourselves here to become like a Superman, like a Deva, as someone called. And I don't know. That's all I got to say. That what a time to be alive.
You have, in a certain sense, you have summarized the principal ideas of Sri Aurobindo. He had, in fact, this idea of the human being only a transitional being in the process of evolution, and because all evolution, not only in the human expression. All evolution is the expression of a spirit that is growing in and through matter and is finding itself through this evolutionary process. So we are in a transitionary state where we are realizing our real identity, which goes beyond this bodily experience. But we are still not there yet. But there is this principle and this idea also of an evolutionary soul. Here again, perhaps we go beyond the binary way of seeing. There's not just a body and a soul, but there is a body, a mind, a life sheet, or whatever you might call it. And then there's this psyche, he called it a psychic being, which is not just a soul. Of course, it is a very metaphysical conception that goes well beyond the scientific material conception. But he claimed that we are psychic beings, which are souls that participate in the physical evolutionary history. And through this process of transmigrations, well, of course, you have to see this in the idea of the theory of reincarnations, from incarnation to incarnation. This psychic being grows in wisdom, in knowledge, in its self-finding that is ultimately the divine itself. So we are the divine, which is finding itself again on the physical level, so to speak. And that's also why I like a bit more the Aurobindonian metaphysical framework than the non-dual framework of Advaita Vedanta. Because Advaita Vedanta is not, in essence, it's not wrong. It's true. Also here we have this Brahman, as you said, there's one without the second, but it is still one step of the realization. For Aurobindo, there is not only the self-finding of the self, as self with capital S, but we have also to transform all our being, because this is the aim of the spirit that finds itself in this evolutionary process. If you see evolution from this point of view, and then switch back again to the scientific perspective, of course, there is an enormous chasm in between. And then you are forced or to reject one or the other, or to look for how to integrate these two very different points of view and see if and how they could potentially fit together. I think this, because when I speak about these metaphysical things, people then believe, but you as a creationist, you believe that there is no evolution. No, evolution is true. It is true that there is also these processes of natural selection. There is this so-called random mutations. What does it mean that something is random? This could be a talk for itself. But pure chance, okay. But you can see this, and you have a completely different understanding of what evolution is, and all what Darwinian evolution says, in essence, is true, and also what this more metaphysical perspective says is also true. Let's see how we can put this together. And the point is not just a philosophical exercise. It's because when we are able to see the whole picture, we will also, in a very down-to-earth practice, behave completely differently. And also the scientist and the laboratory will think and look at the natural environment in a completely different way. And I'm pretty sure we would also pursue very different scientific questions, make very different scientific experiments, and yeah, probably also the funding of this research would be very different, go to very different research projects. It is a lot depends from our, call it philosophical, if you wish, also ideological background, if you wish. But these assumptions, the assumptions with which that we have, and our philosophical background determines how we do things and what we do and how we do it.
Mm-hmm.
And that's in sciences that not alive in science. This idea to put these things together. There's still this idea, okay, you can be a religious person, which, by the way, I'm not a religious person at all. I think that's also something that we have to transcend the religion towards a more spiritual point of view, whatever that might mean. But there's still this idea, okay, science is here, religion or spirituality is there. Yeah, okay. And you wake up in the morning and you go into your laboratory as a scientist and you do your job there. And in the evening, when you come back, perhaps your mind, it goes to more of this philosophy. That's the wrong way to approach this whole thing. We have to find a way where these two things converge, but not in the sum, not in a whole where these two parts are, not in a whole which is made of the sum of these two parts, but in a whole where science and spirituality transcends science and spirituality in a third thing completely. Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. Some neoscience. I don't even know what you call it. I don't know. That's, So you mentioned actually about how we behave differently, right? With this sort of tapping into oneself, this alignment, this intuitive alignment that one can find, right? You mentioned that, experiments would be different. We look at things a little bit differently, but how would we behave differently in our personal lives? Like, how do you say it changes us? That inner discernment. How does it change us in that inner discernment to be able to tap into your own being, your essence, your soul, one could say? How would you say it changes our orientation in life?
Well, you would do completely different things, probably. That there is here again, you can see it from the third person perspective. You would see probably that I would no longer, as I did, follow a normal academic path, because I consider how today we practice our not only science but whatever in an academic environment is completely surpassed, and we need also there to conceive of new forms of education, of new forms of academic institutions, and so on. So this is a third person perspective. So I have left this environment, but because I couldn't bear it any longer, because I was forced to do things that make no longer sense when you have this brighter vision and inner perception and inner feeling of things. And also from the third person perspective, I completely see the world in a completely different manner. I don't see a cat. It's not just an animal. It is an expression of the divine.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you see that, and you feel things completely differently. You see not with your eyes, but see in the metaphorical sense. You see the world and especially life in a completely different manner, and you can see, for example, since we were talking about evolution, how all this turmoil that the world is going through now. You see the same thing that the others see and know from the news, but you give it completely different meaning. It is a transitional turmoil. It is a transition. It is an evolutionary crisis. It is not because someone was not well informed, or because there is a bad guy and there are good guys. And Also the bad guys have their function in this evolutionary drama, and they help us. I'm not justifying at all, but they help us also to evolve ourselves. And you see, everything that happens in the world has somehow a reason. Perhaps you don't see the reason now, but at the end, in hindsight, you can connect the dots and see how it makes sense. Whereas if you don't see how it makes sense, yes, then I can understand those people who fall into depression and say that it makes no sense to me. What is it? And they kill themselves, or I don't know, or do horrible things. Mm-hmm. It changes completely your way of seeing this. First, there's a different way of feeling things, a different way of intuiting things. And then you can also see people also in a different way. Mm-hmm. You can also understand why some people do horrible things and or behave in a certain manner, because they probably also have to go through something.
Yeah.
And I see the psychic being there that needs to make this experience in order to grow.
That's the most important thing, I think, about this expansion of our perspectives, being able to get a glimpse into other beings' perspective here, being able to see how the perceived separation, the seeming separation that we have, and the seeming differences might not be so different after all. I think that's the most important thing. I think that's the greatest part of our conscious evolution right now, is that we're realizing that we're all in this together in one way or the other. And that doesn't negate our differences, but it just allows us to get like a bird's eye view and how, like you said, it all relates in one way or the other. I think that's what's happening right now. And we're going through some transitional turmoil handling that, because not only are we becoming more connected at the psychic level, we're also becoming more interconnected at the material level, as above, so below.
Yeah.
And I mean, like using the internet, like almost literally what we're doing now, we're connected at a non-local level. And that is like, it's something new. That's so novel for humanity. It's like, how do you even digest that in the last, 20, 30 years that it's come about? It's just so much energy. If you want to just look at it at an energetic level, there's just so much energy and information and data that's leading to just a lot of stuff happening, I guess you could say, in a very simple way. There's so much stuff. So I think we're just seeing that culminate on the material level, also in the personal level and the psychic level. I think there's a lot of inner turmoil that people are going through, but like I said, as above, so below. It's just, it could be seen as just a chaotic, dark world, but I do think it is just a reflection of the changes that are happening right now. Yeah. It's we're just going through so much change. I like to say it's like humanity's puberty period. Puberty for a human being is very messy. You feel things you never felt before, and you just a lot of changes happen in a short amount of time. So I think we're going through this very, very it may seem long, but I think it's a quick puberty period for human beings. And it's we're in it right now, but it's all for a reason, I do believe. And that might sound corny and cliche, but I see that as well. There's like all of the turmoil and the war and just the global climate change, whatever, whatever thing that is happening that you may think is the end of the world. It's happening for a reason. And I think it's happening to show us something. It's all a reflection of what is going on at these higher levels, or at these psychic levels. You know what I mean?
Oh, yeah, I think very much, because it is something, for example, this polarization also. Yeah, it's not just something that has gone wrong. In a certain sense, you can see it from a certain point of view and say that's all wrong. But this polarization will help us to find our way as all humanity, to find a human unity in diversity. And probably therefore, we have still to develop something in us to go through this process of extreme polarization to find the unity.
Yeah.
And to see also how in reality, I don't like so much the idea, this word polarization, because there can be also polarization in harmony. We can be united in, for example, any one nation and have extremely different ideas, points of view, cultures, languages, whatever. And this is, but of course, we are speaking about more polarization in the sense of conflict. And this is probably, yes, I see it as the emergence of something subconscious that was always there. Mm-hmm. Here again, we are looking at the things in levels and sheets. This helps us a lot to get the whole picture. In the subconscious, this polarization was always there. For me, it's quite obvious. But now, also technology, like the internet and so on, expose these subconscious conflicts and bring them to light, and show, and then we have to deal with it, and we are forced to deal with it. But also, let's see it even from a even more material point of view. There is still the spirit at work, because, for example, you were talking about the internet, the advent of the internet. You can see it from a very materialistic technological point of view. You say, oh, well, it's a technological development that, we invented the computers, the chips, microchips, and electronics, and so on. We put that together, and then there is, of course, all the commercial interests to build these things, and so on. And step by step, this internet grew and has connected humanity. This is one point of view. I like to take another point of view. I like to say deep down, we are only one spirit. We all are one consciousness that is emerging. And by playing a bit the trick of differentiating itself into many people, individuals, souls, if you like, organisms, and so on, has now the necessity to find itself back in unity. And it sees that now the time is ripe, and that you can find this unity also at the superficial level. And then, this allows for the development of that technology.
Yeah.
You see, so what was the cause and what was the effect? Here again, we have the cause effect. It becomes a bit murky thing. But if you see things from this point of view, my subject on which I have specialized is more on the scientific perspective, but it's not because I think it's the most important point of view. It's only my personal bias, if you think, but because of my educational background, of course. But I like very much to see things also, this development of the technologies, they have a meaning inside this broader picture. Mm-hmm. And that's why I say AI, for example, yes, it will determine a lot of things and change a lot of things, but let's not see it only from that perspective, because then we fall in, for example, in this transhumanist idea that where the next step of evolution is a sort of hybridization between flesh and machine, something like that, or brain and machine. I don't think that this will be the next evolutionary step, or not only. We might use devices for curing diseases or for making people that are blind. You put the chip instead of the retina or things like that. That similar things are already on the way. But the evolution will be the evolution of consciousness, and not the evolution of the consciousness of the machine, but the evolution of the consciousness that is already here in us, but has to grow.
Yeah, I like that. It's like the material world is a reflection of what's happening on the inside, and it's like what's happening first is this consciousness deep down, the sense that just the I amness is becoming more aware of itself, and that is just a reflection. Like everything that's happening through our technology is a reflection of what's happening internally in the other koshas, maybe one could say, in the other bodies that we have. It's like it's just coming about, and we're seeing it through technology and the advent of AI. But ultimately, where it starts, it's not from the material world. It's like I said, it's a reflection of the material world. And AI will never solve the hard problem of consciousness, no matter what. No matter if we are linked up with Neuralink, it will never solve that. Like the why, it might get to how, but like the why in the story of humanity, and really like, there's nothing that can ever explain it. No matter how fast our brains are moving, no matter how much processing power we have, it'll never explain that subjective experience that one yearns for. But I think just naturally, like we said, as we become more in tune with that subjective experience, I think the outside world is going to become more technologically evolved. But if you look for that explanation of why from the outside world, it doesn't work like that. That's working backwards. It's like it's like a reflection of the collective unconsciousness in a way. I don't know. I'm just thinking out loud here, but it seems like you said, it's just a natural, as we're evolving solely subjectively, finding that all within ourselves, the material world is following suit.
It's following something that goes beyond the material. That's the background idea.
It seems like it. That's getting back to the layers thing. I don't know.
And this layers thing, it's also it's not about agreeing, because you once might also not agree and say these are not these layers, and I don't see this layer, I see another layer.
Or you see the one layer. All is one.
It's very, very deep, at the very, very bottom, at the very, very highest point of level. You might see this also from this point of view, but let me make another example. So, sorry if I insist a bit on this. Just recently, I read a very interesting article of what is his name? Well, in any case, a scientist who studies plants and was asking if plants have a consciousness. So this might seem a bit too far-fetched question, but now science is discovering that also not only plants, but also single celled organism, a single cell, behave as if they have at least what they call technically a basal cognition. That is, they are able to understand is perhaps too strong word, but they are able to behave in a way as if they know and cognize the world, that there is an elemental form of mind. There is this form of cognition. They are able to make to make deduction in a certain sense, and to learn things as if they have a brain. But plants don't have a brain, and let alone cells. No? But it is now becoming one of the major discussion points of at least the philosophy of biology, that cells and plants have this sort of basal cognition. There are a lot of experiments that show this. You can see even a plant that grabs wooden pole. In these videos, time-lapse videos, you can see really the most incredible thing is that it seems that it sees the pole before touching it. It's somehow we don't know how this can be.
The pole is there.
The pole is there, and then flatters first in that direction, not randomly until it finds the pole, but in the direction of the pole, and then grabs it. This typical grabbing off that we have with our hands, also with all primates have, as if it is seeing and as if it is knowing, and makes this willing decision, there is a volition to grab it. And this is one of the many experiments that show that there is this basal cognition, but there are no neurons, there are no brains. So for me, this is already one of the main points where I say mind is more fundamental than matter. It is already there before the neural network. But the question of this article was, is a plant conscious? So you go through all the long article, and it's conscious, it's not conscious, it's conscious, it's not conscious. But here again, we are thinking in binary terms. Maybe that's not only one consciousness and then complete unconsciousness. Maybe also consciousness has different levels. It's difficult to define, but here again, we must take the first person experience. When I sleep, for example, and have dreams, am I unconscious? No, I would not say so, because there is still someone who has the experience of the dream. So I'm not completely unconscious. It is another state of consciousness, an altered state of consciousness. If you wish, call it also lower state of consciousness. But there's not an on-off idea. And also when someone is in coma, is there no consciousness at all? We don't know. There's some research that shows that we have good reasons to believe that people in coma are conscious, but they are not conscious of the outside world. They are conscious probably from something very internal. But we give it for granted that physicalist materials. You can see that also articles in peer-reviewed journals where the scientist starts from this assumption and says, since a brain that is in coma is unconscious, and when we are in a waking consciousness, the human waking consciousness, by the way, is the consciousness. There could be no other form of consciousness. Then on this assumption, they construct all a theoretical castle of the model, which is based on the wrong, in my point of view, on a wrong assumption. And the idea that there could be also higher states of consciousness that go beyond mind, this is almost never addressed.
It's like consciousness is a spectrum.
Yes, consciousness is a spectrum, first of all, and it's difficult for them to get out of this binary thinking. And not only is a spectrum, but maybe the question is, there is something also that goes beyond, there are also other forms of knowledge that go beyond the purely rationalistic. There is perhaps an intuitive vision, and what Schrobindo called also the supramental, that probably has nothing mental at all, but it's just a word. It goes way beyond the mind and has this much more evolved way of seeing the world in much more holistic point of view, and which sees the spirit behind all the things. Now, what the supermind is, it would be a bit long thing to, but this is again not taken into account. And it would be perfectly in line with Darwinian evolution, because we are a species, a human Homo sapiens, has evolved and has developed what we call mind. What exactly the reason, the rationality, analytic mind. Don't ask me to define what it is. But I think more or less everyone knows what we are speaking about, which in animals, you can find it also in animals, but perhaps not so developed. No? I mean, animals don't build spaceships and computers, and there is not this, it's not the same thing. But we know through this Darwinian evolutionary process, there was first this single cell, then plants and organisms and brains, and also our cognitive abilities changed continuously. For some reason, most scientists never give a thought about the fact that also rationality, reason, which is on which science itself is based, is just a transitionary form of cognition. Beyond reason, there are other higher forms of cognition that may be very useful for science itself to enlarge its horizons. Mm-hmm. And it is very in line with Darwinian evolution. And yet it's something most scientists say, no, everything must be analytical, must be based on pure logical reason, because otherwise it's not true. Yeah. We have still this identity. Only what is rational is true. Everything is, okay, it's nice. It's poetry.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So that's my appeal. Let's see if we can go beyond these dichotomies.
Yeah, I like that. You said it's poetry. I believe this at a certain point, poetry almost is needed, because our current paradigm is seeing is believing quite pragmatically. But there is a certain sense of seeing that we can all come down to, a certain, not even seeing, a seeing that goes beyond seeing within the subjective experience that does, in a way, transcend that, transcend the spectrum of consciousness in a way. I mean, one could say that it is part of the same consciousness as consciousness, but in a way it does seem like it goes outside of that spectrum of experience, because like you said, right, we kind of base upon what is consciousness. It's like, well, is this thing having an experience, right? That's kind of like the first question. It's like, is there a viewer to the movie, right? Even if the movie is in the dream state, in a coma state, in this waking state, is there something that is perceiving what is happening, right? I guess that's one step or one layer of consciousness that we could say is something conscious. And then there's another layer. It's like, well, then from that experience, is it making a decision? Can it write the script to the movie, right? That's another layer to it. And then I feel as though the another layer is like, well, it's when it's like it transcends the writer of the movie and the experiencer, and it's coming in from like this other source that is like not even really quite perceivable to the five senses. Like there's this, like there's the consciousness that we can kind of explain through the words that we're using, but then there's like another layer, like you said, the super consciousness that might even play a part, like the hand of God, right? That one could say, like this thing that we truly can't even explain, but still does play a part in the movie of life. Like there's still like that essence, but it's like, that's something that we truly won't ever really be able to explain, I don't think, but one can feel it. I think this is the whole gist of the conversation, right? Is if you go within, you can, in a way, transcend the ideas of something experiencing this and trying to explain. Like you can feel like that there is this other force that is in you and of you, and that is like it's the Tao, the way, one could say, right? It's like there's this something else that we're involved in that isn't really something else, but I can't explain it. So in a way, it is something else. It's something else than the rationale can explain, but it's not something else at all. It's actually something that we're a part of, something greater that human beings exist in, that I don't believe numbers and language will ever truly be able to explain. We can touch upon, we can point the way, but the symbol will never be able to truly explain what the symbol stands for. So I don't know really what else to go from that, to be honest, but I think that's the whole gist of the conversation, is that there's something else that we're a part of that is quite greater than anything that I could try to explain. That's the gist of this whole thing, I think.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think when I speak of the first person perspective is precisely that: go inward and feel not accept everything, because again, a lot of things come from our lower subconscious realm, but connect with this inner spirit which tells you and whispers you the truth about things.
Yeah.
Even if you cannot explain it, as you say, explaining in irrational terms. Because the word explaining would be interesting to know the etymology of this word, but explaining is still something that requests, that requests analytic, mental explanation and a mental it comes out of X means from.
So this is from Old French. Well, Middle English is explaining. Old French is explainer. Latin is explaino, and it means to flatten out. To like
Flatten.
Okay. Yeah, to flatten.
You see, what I very often see
to make
is
level, to make clear. It's like to
wonderful. The etymology of the words expresses sometimes an enormous wisdom. Yeah. Because it flattens. It is about flattening something that is much more richer. It is a vision. When you perceive this inner force, spirit, something, whatever you want to call it, and that suggests you something, a knowledge, the mind flattens it. It's, I love the etymology of words, because they very often tell us something that we have forgotten.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it goes beyond like the base level meaning.
Yeah.
It's like a code in a way.
Also, the word evolution means to roll out, evolvere. Okay, but then the question is, what is that to roll out? Because then there is something already contained in it. Yeah. And this is, by the way, contrary to the idea of the modern science, because modern science says we put these things together, and everything that emerges from this bottom-up approach is an epiphenomenon, is something that appears from the outside, but it is not something fundamental. The fundamental things are the particles that stick together, and then this thing emerges. But here, evolution is not about an emergent property at the macroscopic level. Here, from this point of view, evolution is something that is rolled out, which is already contained.
Yes. Yeah. That's a good way to put it.
Yeah. The etymology is a great science.
Yeah.
I love it.
It's rolled out. It's already like I pictured it. It's in a ball that's just unraveling.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The question is, what is in there that must be unraveled?
What is this flower that is blooming?
Yeah, and it's already contained in the seed. Something is already contained in the seed, in its potentiality, and flowers out. Flower like flower. That's what evolution is about. It is the flowering of a spirit that is already there before the Big Bang. But it is emerging in and through matter, not because of matter. Whereas the point of view of science is because of matter. Again, here, let's see things from the different perspectives and then bring them together, not exclude one to the other. And that's the great challenge of the modern scientific mind that I see. And we are still not there. I think most scientists are open to these ideas. The problem is not so much in the mind of the scientists in general, but in the at the institutional level. If they would come out with these things and say, let's make a research that finds out for something that goes into this direction, they will not get funds, or they may not be taken seriously by their colleagues, or you might have a problem with your career. So a lot of scientists, I believe, are already there, but in their everyday life, in their academic environment, continue in the old paradigm, because it's easier now. You don't have to bother about your future career. You can see this also how they speak it and how they speak about certain things. It is a very different way of expressing things than those that you hear from the purely materialistic thinking people.
Yeah, I see. Well, thankfully we have people like you.
As I said, now I don't like to be no longer involved in this. I do my own research. I'm trying to publish also some papers. I got also some papers published, but you can see that the ideological mindset, because when you publish papers in scientific journals, you have to subject them to the peer review. And from the comments that you get, this is very binary. There are referees who are very willing, very open to this idea, and then if you are lucky, you get those referees and you get it published, and the others who reject it a priori. And you see, it's not the content, what is said. It's not the internal consistency of the paper. It is the ideological background of who is reading this and judging this. That determines. That's life.
That's life. You're right, man. Yeah, that's a tough one. I mean, I don't know what to say to that because I'm not in the scientific field. The only thing I would recommend to you is maybe branch out from that classical way of doing things and actually just try having conversations with people that you think you would be able to connect with, because I think there's a lot of power in just being able to have an in-depth conversation and not have to rely on peer-reviewed journals, to get your idea out there.
But I like it nevertheless. Do you know why? Because once you take this perspective, you see that all the evidence is already there. Now people are very in this psi research, EPS research, extrasensorial ESP research, extrasensorial phenomena, which I have no issues with that. I believe in these things. I think I don't know. I'm not an expert from the scientific point of view of this kind of research, but I'm pretty open to that, and I think they, at least some, certainly have discovered these so-called paranormal effects and so on. But my point is that we don't need all that. It's already there in all the period. Let me make a last example, because I don't want to take too much time. But for example, we are speaking about this issue comes up: is consciousness an epiphenomenon of the brain, or is it is there something more? And there was, for example, Aldous Huxley, who was a famous philosopher, also William James, a psychologist, who framed this hypothesis that the brain may be just a sort of reducing valve of a mind at large, of a universal mind. the reducing valve was more Aldous Huxley, where William James spoke of the brain as a sort of radio, in form of a radio metaphor. He said the brain is necessary to receive the mind, but it's not the mind, like the people that you hear talking in a radio are not in the radio, but if you want to, the radio must work. They had this metaphor. And if you look at the scientific evidence, neurological scientific evidence, it is much more in line with this idea than the physicalist idea that says everything comes out of this neuronal interaction. For example, you can have people that have split brains. I don't know if some people because they have epilepsy and very strong epileptic attacks. And one of the possible solutions to this, it's only an extreme ratio, it's only an extreme surgical intervention that I don't know if it is practiced still today, but one of these solutions was that you cut the brain in two parts, that is the connecting parts, the corpus callosum, which is two parts of the brain that it is a connection of the two parts, of the two hemispheres of the brain. You cut this in two. What happens? These people, first of all, don't have these epileptic seizures, which is certainly a good thing. They have some issues in the sense that they have issues to distinguish and coordinate left and right brain, and that's so perhaps your hand does something and the other hand does something else, and so on. Mm-hmm. But these people are still one subject, one and unique self, and they don't report to feel to be split in two persons. How can we explain this if really the brain produces one subject? And it is also already extremely surprising that this is possible in the first place, because take the motherboard of your computer and you will see what it happens if you cut it in two parts, and you will have nothing. You can trash it immediately. The brain has this extraordinary ability, which is due to neuroplasticity and whatever. So, but you don't have two personalities. In the standard reductionist, physicalist paradigm, this is very difficult. I don't say impossible, but it is very difficult to explain. Whereas if you accept this idea of the brain as a reducing valve of universal mind, it fits much better. And this is only one example.
Yeah.
In my book, I make all the examples that you can have also people who have only one part of the brain completely, only half of the brain.
And they still feel like they're that I am sense. They feel like
they are
themselves.
Completely the same. Doesn't change absolutely. And also people who know these people don't see any difference in the personality. Personality is the same.
Yeah.
This doesn't mean that these people don't have issues. They have issues, as I said. But the issues are more of a motoric nature. Uh-huh. You have problem to move your body in a coordinate manner and so on. But from the intellectual level, no difference in intelligence or whatever. There's an extreme case of a French man who had only 80% of his brain. 80%. So if you make a brain scan, you see a gigantic hole in his brain, and he has only 20% of the substance. Well, it's not clear if this is a compressed brain or how much is left, and so. But in any case, and this is a person who is normal, who has a job, has a family, and didn't know nothing about it until he had an issue with his leg. And then they made a brain scan and they saw that there's almost nothing in it. So the question is, what is the brain really useful for? I'm not saying that this is a final demonstration of something metaphysical, but it fits much better. This peer-reviewed science is already there. It fits much better, a completely different paradigm than the purely materialistic one.
Yeah.
But we have to be able to make the switch of perception and way of seeing not only these papers, the world in its wholeness, and especially life, us, ourselves, and other people, and be able to see things at a multi-layered level, multi-dimensional level, and be open that perhaps we should read the facts also with another lens, and then we would see something very different.
Well said.
I hope that makes sense.
Made sense to me.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's actually a good note to wrap this thing up on.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is a wonderful talk. I don't have anything else left to say, to be honest. Yeah, I think the whole theme is that we are a multi-layered, multi-dimensional organism that's slowly figuring itself out in that way.
Yeah.
The book is still being written, the story of humanity is still, it goes on. The movie goes on, the show is going on right now. I feel as though the current paradigm that we spoke about, the 21st century materialistic paradigm, it's like, to me, it seems like we reached like an end point. Like, this is it.
Yeah.
Darwinian evolution is done. We got Google, we got Wikipedia, we have the internet. That's it. We stopped evolving. But I think from our conversation, we've come to the conclusion that we have not concluded. We're still evolving. It may just be in a different way. It may just be not necessarily negating Darwinian evolution, but it's still evolution. There's it's a different way of evolving, conscious evolution, as I like to say. So yeah, I don't have anything else left to say other than that. Appreciate your time, effort, and wisdom. This was really an amazing talk, Marco. I wish you all the best. Keep doing your thing, man. You're a real one.
Thank you, Gary.
For sure.
Yeah, thank you, Gary. It was also for me a very inspiring talk, because I felt also that it came through something. So
yeah.
And thank you for giving me the occasion, because these are kind of things it's not easy to speak with friends in a bar. These things.
Yeah, I feel that.
It's nice to have also this opportunity to express myself. And thank you very much, Gary.
Of course. Well,
okay.
Wish you all the best. Thank you very much.
You too. Thank you.
Peace out.
Have a nice time.
Bye-bye.